from today's tech. And in the past few years, I feel like we've really seen Apple make some strides with adding customization to their flagship product, the iPhone. And it's really been a long time coming. Like, some of these features Androids and Samsungs have had for a really long time. But like I've said before, Apple usually doesn't mind showing up late to the party because they're usually fashionably late. And they're a little bit more fashionable than Google and Samsung in some really key areas. So that's what really makes this guy a compelling choice for Android users. Come hear me out. So the first compelling aspect of iPhone 14 Pro is the display. Apple's been putting out some solid displays since the first OLED iPhone, iPhone 10, and they always get the panels from Samsung Display, which is a separate company from Samsung Electronics. So as you can imagine, displays in Samsung's flagships have, for the most part, always been better than displays in iPhones. Like, why would Samsung sell their rival a better panel than they would sell their own sister company? They wouldn't do that, right? Oh, wait a minute. Damn. Oh, wait, no, they did do that. Yeah, Samsung Display literally sold brighter panels than were used for the S22 Ultra, which is kind of crazy, as if the iPhone needed another feature that's arguably better than Galaxies can offer. So the 14 Pro has an outdoor peak brightness of 2000 nits. Meanwhile, the S22 Ultra has an outdoor peak brightness of 1750 nits. So yeah, this display is solid indoors or out. Colors and contrast are punchy, and ProMotion is excellent as always. And it's funny, once you get used to 120 hertz, you can easily tell when it's not 120. So you'll notice certain areas of the UI where a high refresh rate probably wouldn't improve your experience. It's not quite as smooth. Apple's definitely gotten it down to a science with these LTPO displays they've been using for a couple years now. And they can get all the way down to 1 hertz for the always on display or other static images around the UI. And as far as directly comparing it to the S22 Ultra, they're virtually indistinguishable when it comes to color reproduction and whatnot. From my eye, the only difference I can see is in the brightness. So iPhone 14 and 14 Pro Max have the best displays in the game. That's very compelling. Okay, Dynamic Island. I mean, first off, major props to the team that kept this a secret. I don't think anyone saw this coming. So y'all are the real MVPs. And secondly, I mean, I just don't think anyone expected Apple to lean into the notch so hard. They took something that was an eyesore and turned it into a feature that it seems like the majority of people like. And I'm a part of that majority. And at first glance, it looks to be a solid pill-shaped cutout, but when you look at it off axis, you can see that it's actually a smaller pill cutout and a hole punch cutout combined into one. And this is really impressive stuff. I mean, given that this display is an OLED, Apple has basically just turned off the pixels around the camera hardware. And what we end up with is like a living, breathing, bouncing pill. As of now, you'll find any system notifications there, like plugging in for charging or taking out your AirPods. And the detail with which the developers paid attention is just wild. Like when you're on a call, you see the audio waveform. Well, it shows orange for sound coming from your end and green for sound coming from the other end. The little things. But here's where it gets even more interesting. If you're using 2 apps that support the Dynamic Island, say you're on a call, but you're also using the timer. Well, in this case, the pill splits in 2, and now it becomes this sort of app switcher between the 2. And then any app that's using the island can be long pressed and expanded into a widget to interact with. Dope. Now, this is clearly just phase 1 of its development, so I certainly expect iOS 17 to take it up a notch. No pun intended. Now, in my opinion, Apple's strong suit has always been software. Now, obviously not in the sheer number of software features, but in the implementation of said software. And lately, we've seen several prominent Android features make their way over to iOS. Case in point, the app library. Androids have had this since day 1. Well, 14 operating systems later, here comes Apple with an app library that automatically categorizes and names folders in the library. As an Android user, I wish we had it like that. I actually took the liberty of creating folders and categorizing them myself to tidy up my app screen and make it look closer to that of Apple's app library. Now, in comes lock screen customization. Again, old feature on the Android side, but Apple's way involves the ability to create multiple lock screens, kind of like watch faces. And then on top of that, you can assign a focus mode to a lock screen. And then on top of that, you can customize a home screen page that goes right along with it. Now, you can't tell me that is not a phenomenal implementation of lock screen customization and focus modes. And then to make focus modes even better, they've added filters so you can fine tune which apps or which system settings you want tying into that particular focus mode. I feel like because of the fact that Apple has been observing Android features from an outside perspective for so long, that they've just had ample time to figure out how to make it better or more useful. And I can appreciate that. Just like I'd appreciate a sub to the channel. Then there's other things like the speed with which Apple Pay works. It's just faster than Samsung Pay or GPay, and I beta tested Samsung Pay, meaning I've been using contactless payments for almost a decade, so I would know. Or things like shortcuts and automation, the ability to use Siri to complete a chain of commands, not only for on-device stuff, but also for third-party apps, something stock Android itself doesn't even offer. Samsung has Bixby routines, which is phenomenal for on-device stuff, but in-depth third-party support is virtually non-existent. I can literally say, "Hey Siri, it's chest day," and it launches my chest workout in the Strong app. Super clutch. Oh, and I do like the notifications coming from the bottom. It's obviously much easier to reach. So yeah, I mean, they don't always knock it out of the park. Case in point, always on display on an iPhone, something Androids have had for several years now. Apple's implementation, however, is a bit of a double-edged sword for me. On the one hand, it's nice to have it added. It looks really good because it's basically just the lock screen dimmed a little bit. However, on the other hand, it's just too bright. Like there's just too many times a day when you look over at it and you think it's on. I certainly prefer the Android implementation where it's just super minimal with the date and time front and center and just the app icons for any notifications. And I know I'm not alone in thinking this. And then battery drain wise, my man Farouk ran a little test, and after 24 hours of the AOD directly underneath a lamp, it lost 17% more than with AOD off. Now, that sounds really bad, but that's totally a worst case scenario. Like the phone's gonna be in your pocket or in your bag, and even if it's on the table all day, it's likely not gonna be at full brightness. But at the end of the day, what Apple is trying to do here is reinvent the wheel as far as how an AOD works. And I'm sorry to tell you, but this ain't it, Chief. And then there's just some things that I just simply do not like. Case in point, the settings situation. Well, as you may or may not know, on Android, settings for system apps are accessed within the app itself. So message settings are in the Messages app, etc. Well, Apple makes the settings menu the settings hub for any settings, period. And I mean, I get it, but it creates an extra step. Maybe it makes the apps run smoother if the settings aren't baked in. Who knows? And oh boy, home screen customization is quite tedious. If you forget to turn off automatically adding apps to your home screen, good luck. You're gonna have to remove them one by one. Nice one, Apple. Oh, and before I forget, you're not slick, Apple. We know what your intentions are by rocking with eSIM only. One, it makes switching to an iPhone seem so simple. And two, if you happen to have multiple devices that you switch between, well, now switching away from an iPhone is a whole process. You got to get your eSIM transferred over. It's not as simple as just a SIM card swap. Surprised? No. The walled garden is real. Now, battery wise, without diving into too many metrics, I'm definitely getting a lesser battery experience with the 14 Pro's roughly 3200 milliamp hour cell as I was with the S22 Ultra's 5000 milliamp hour cell, which sounds about right. I went back and checked Aaron's video and the 14 Pro performed slightly worse than the S22 Ultra in his battery test. So the optimization on this guy is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I can only imagine how good the Pro Max is. I honestly just wanted to test out having a smaller phone for once, and I'm actually enjoying it. Now, iPhone 14 Pro got a pretty solid camera update, bumping up the main sensor to 48 megapixels, enhancing image processing with the new photonic engine, and improving low light performance across the board. Obviously, iPhone has been the king of video for quite some time now, and that lead clearly extends further. So last year they added cinematic mode, but now it's been bumped up to 4K and it is crispy. And beyond that, for whatever reason, iPhones just capture so much more detail. And I know Apple doesn't mention any features like Real Tone from Google, but I think it does a solid job accurately reproducing darker skin tones, far better than Samsung, which is what I'm used to. and it carries over to video as well. So for the most part, I shouldn't have to throw on a real tone filter to every shot I take. Now, surprisingly, you don't get any fringing or focus issues going on with the new larger sensor when you take closer shots without switching to macro mode. I know this was a huge issue for the S20 Ultra's 100 megapixel lens because the plane of focus was so thin, if you were slightly off, you got a blurry shot. Thankfully, not an issue here. And a really nice side effect of having a larger sensor is beautiful natural bokeh without portrait mode. Okay, and then the sheer fact that you can shoot 4K HDR 10-bit ProRes footage on your smartphone is just absolutely insane. Just make sure you get the 256 gig model, otherwise you'll be capped at 1080 at 30 FPS. At 4K, 1 minute of footage is 6 gigs. Absolute insanity. But what I really like is how fast the shutter and image processing are. I feel pretty confident whipping this guy out and snapping right away, which might seem like a simple thing, but when you've dealt with a slow shutter for years, it becomes low-key monumental. So safe to say iPhone 14 Pro retains its crown in video, for now at least. We'll see if Pixel 7 has anything to say about it, but I'm not willing to crown it the photo champ in my book. Still Team Pixel for photos. So all in all, what makes iPhone 14 Pro a compelling choice for Android users can be simplified into this: excellent software experience, arguably best-in-class display, and excellent cameras for photos and videos. Now, obviously, you can find a similar description on an Android device, but there just isn't one that compares to the overall software experience, in my opinion. So my take, I would say if you've been considering, I would go for it. Unfortunately, it's not easy to migrate ecosystems, but given the benefits and the drawbacks, I would say it's very compelling at this point in time. And with that, thanks for supporting the channel by sticking around until the end. Always appreciated. Make sure to like, leave a comment, but most importantly, get subscribed and turn on notifications right now. Alrighty guys, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace and love.